particular this particular set of the framework are the ideation, the design, and the composition. There is the experience, which is implementation and communication, and the impact, which is measurement and analysis. So this is kind of an overall framework in which you can start building your process, looking at the way that you're operating in several different types of situations. So that would be in how you're applying it to your business, how you are approaching a new creative project. And this will allow you to continue to refine, continue to be observant of your own way of being, your own process, your kind of your secret sauce. Because the truth is the creations, the businesses, the meat are all kind of a means to the end. So I'm going to jump into this, but just because you may not have seen it before, the context and influence that are up at the top, that is more of these shaping factors like your environment, your like the strategy of what you're approaching, yourself, like your values, your identity, and also just if you're working with others, kind of meshing that together before you kind of jump into the framework. So that's just a reference for what that is specifically. And then the knowledge bank is really kind of what you're building over time. So that's the experiences, that is the insights that you keep, and you can, whether you're putting it in Notion or you have it just for yourself in your own brain, your great memory, who you have in your sphere, in your systems, in your community. These are all resources that you can tap into at any point. So the context and influence shapes the process, and the knowledge bank is the piece that kind of helps support it. So, all right, going to the next. Okay, so this is just kind of an outline of what is coming today. I'll see if you can't read it, I'm going to go ahead and just share it with you, just because I know I had to make this a bit smaller for Instagram Live. So let's see, one second. So there's the creator innovator mindset, tuning into the collective network, and a moment, inspiration, incubation, and illumination, evaluating and refining ideas in the intro to that, and then choosing a to impact project. So let me go ahead and get into that. Thank you for being so patient. This was an experiment of mine, and this is part of my process too. So when I'm sharing some of this, it is because there was a reason why I wanted to start testing it into Instagram, and you have to do it live. Obviously last night it worked great, and I had to do it on here today. So this is actually really, really helpful for me as well. And you'll see when you start incubating a lot of these ideas, and you're working on them, sometimes you have to get into the experience itself for many people to understand if it's something that you want to continue with, and you have to do it in a space that's a little bit more public than just in your own bubble, because sometimes that is kind of where the magic happens, or where you can see if there are issues, or if there's feedback coming from the loop that is something that you want to consider as you refine your process. So this is more addressing the creator innovator mindset. So when you're looking at common, either you could say traits, or you're looking into how creators and innovators think, there are commonalities. And this is something that I addressed in a Sunday set, which is the newsletter and the lives that kind of set the intention for the week. But these different traits, or these different types of mindsets, will allow you to kind of get into the space of creation, of ideation, and to frame your creation process in a more, I guess it would be a more aligned way with how you work, as opposed to trying to fit your creation process into a specific set of steps that maybe are not aligned with your particular values or how you best work. So when you're looking at the when you're looking at the different traits, you want to see maybe not only what they are, but also kind of where you feel that there is some resistance on your end. So all of this, as I lead you through this process, and I'm sorry that I didn't mention that before, just because of the fixing all of the things that were coming up. But when we're going through this to impact process, this is really about taking a project through a process so that you can reflect on your own journey, right? So it's not necessarily about, okay, we're going to launch a product, or we're going to launch a project or a service or whatever that may be, and see what, how much we can grow it, because there are a lot of spaces out there that can help you do that. And that's going to be actually a lot more helpful for you if you do that within a little bit more of your niche in where you're working, the type of creator that you are. But this is more so understanding how you operate within the system, within the process, and how you approach all of your projects and like places where you can innovate or ways that you can create impact. So returning to this, so one of the biggest commonalities with creators, innovators, and probably some of the interviews of like Elon Musk and some of the top innovators of our time, Steve Jobs, is a sense of curiosity. So a lot of times we're told when we're younger, like, there's, don't ask stupid questions, or maybe there are no stupid questions, whatever you might hear. There is this feeling that asking questions means you don't know enough, or that asking questions can be either, if your teachers are saying, if they're encouraging it, it's because they want to understand you, to better understand the material, to sharpen your questioning skills. And then there'll be many times where we're in a situation where we feel like asking a question makes us look like we don't understand what's going on, or we ask a question and we're afraid that it's going to be seen as a stupid question, or quote unquote stupid question. But the truth is most of success, at least in a lot of interviews, and I also believe this as well, comes from asking the right questions, learning how to be curious, learning how to discover more information, look into systems, get to know people better. And that curiosity really is what drives innovation. It drives creativity, because you're able to take in the inputs of the world and be able to want to take them a step further, want to dig in a little deeper, want to apply it somewhere else, want to see how you can bring value to this situation, see how you can connect other people, whatever that may be. Curiosity really is the fuel for innovation and creation, because with everything else, if you don't have a curious mind, or you feel that whatever you're receiving is the be all end all, there's not going to be a lot of creation and innovation happening in your process, because if you're kind of just taking information as it is, you're not going to be able to see the possibilities of what it could be, right? And then other aspects of this would be the openness. So obviously this has to do with curiosity as well, but openness is really more to not having a preconceived notion of what something is. So we may all have our opinions, and we may all have our thoughts on something, our experiences, which are all valid, but having an openness to other perspectives, an openness to change. And I know this kind of leads into some of these others, but an openness to new ideas. It's really just avoiding resistance. So a lot of times when there's change, when there are things that are new, when there are perspectives that are different than your own, there's a sense of, this is our ego speaking, of not wanting to be open, wanting to be right, wanting to know it all. There's not a lot of safety that comes with being open, because there's a vulnerability there. If you're open to new ideas, it means that things can change, your identity can change, your creations can change. So having an openness to your experience allows you also to be more curious as well. And having a perspective of what is and what can be, also, again, these are all connected to each other, but there may be nuances of these that you can self-reflect and say, hey, this is an area where I really shine. This is an area where I'm really kind of struggling a bit, or I've noticed I'm struggling a bit, and I may be unintentionally blocking myself. The perspective of what is and what can be is really more about living in multiple realities. And that may sound kind of wild, and if you're it's not necessarily meant to be this multiverse type of thinking. It's really more just understanding that you can be present in the moment and accept what is, look at what exists, and then also live in a visualization of the future and truly be able to feel into that and then see how to bridge that gap in between. The issue is when we either live in the past, which is also very informing of how something has evolved. Of course, a system has evolved, a product has evolved, art has evolved, and getting stuck in that, being in the present and not necessarily looking far enough ahead to see what could be, because sometimes we will look to create or innovate and we look too close to the problem. We're looking at the quick fix as opposed to the long-term systemic fix that may be way more impactful than just, tweaking and upgrading. And then so when you're looking into the future, it's that what can be, and allowing yourself to be able to visualize that possibility and how we might be able to accomplish that. So holding those multiple perspectives of what is and what can be is really important. And also it's not written there, but it's also the perspective of just different lenses, trying on different lenses and being able to see things from different perspectives. So if you have customers, seeing that from their perspective, if you yourself seeing it from your perspective, being aware of your own perspective, seeing it from the perspective of people who could be impacted by this, and holding space for that and having empathy for that. Because when you get to embody those spaces with a open and curious mindset, right, you're able to come up with ideas from coming from different pain points, right, or different goals, maybe even too. So if you are looking you're able to embody those different perspectives, the future self, the past self, the potential customer who you're impacting, your community, whatever that may be, you're able to kind of think from all of those spaces. So you really get to kind of take that ideation and brainstorming outside of just quote unquote your own brain, which is kind of a cool way of thinking of it. I love thinking of it that way, just because I think sometimes we have certain limiting beliefs that will get in the way and we are not even realizing it. So sometimes that walking in someone else's shoes or embodying that future self or kind of delimiting your present and experience for a moment can also help in problem solving as well. So being able to shift between those is really important. So accepting of change and uncertainty. So as mentioned with the openness, that you want to be non-resistant to what's coming to you and be open and curious to how you can flow along with it, or what are the opportunities here to thrive, right? So change and uncertainty are really the only constants. When I was talking about in some of the introductions about like chaos theory and the butterfly effect, chaos theory really is about there are a lot of underlying patterns and systems that connect things that are seemingly not connected, right? And it's not necessarily that we always need to know about them. It's just understanding that change and uncertainty does not equate to it being unsafe. And I think that is something that we all have to face when we get the survival aspect of our brain coming in and saying, okay, there's a change, there is uncertainty, I don't have clarity, so I can't move forward. and you get this paralysis. It'll be like, sometimes it's analysis paralysis, sometimes it's just paralysis of whatever beliefs you have about if change is coming, the safety in that, and then feeling uncertain and knowing that you may not have the answer. Not having the answer is actually a really interesting space, because that means you might be creating something that's very, very special. Because if you already knew the answer, then why would you even be necessarily addressing that problem? Someone's probably already addressed it, right? Why, if there's uncertainty that's there, that's also because you may be working on something mentally that's a lot bigger than what you're realizing. So understanding that uncertainty doesn't necessarily mean that you are powerless is something that is such a perspective shift that I think will not only help in the creation and innovation process, but just in life, in resilience. And the accepting of change is, we have experienced this many, many times because of pandemic. We've had economic recessions. We've had Facebook and Instagram down, whatever that may be. We have to know that there is this willingness to accept change and uncertainty and it be okay. And that's why also I love this focus on the process over the thing, because we can take our process in the way that we approach into any space, no matter what, whether there's uncertain circumstances, if there are changes that are happening, we're able to ground ourselves in how we approach and how we see and feel out problem solving and our own process, so that we can thrive in these changes instead of feel stuck. So the other things are beginner's mindset, which is so there's two aspects of it. So there's the beginner's mindset of when you are trying something new and you have that ability to see past what is, right? So sometimes when you're an expert in the field, there is a level of innovation that can happen because you have such deep knowledge and you have a well of, coming from that knowledge bank that I was talking about, that can inform everything that you're doing. But at the same time, sometimes you miss a very cool connection between spaces, or a different solution that maybe you're just not used to doing. You've been through this process many, many times and you haven't seen it done another way, or you've perfected a way, but maybe there's a new way that it could be done. And practicing that beginner's mindset is really important. So beginner's mindset really can be, you can bring that into your work even if you are an expert. So that's just trying, introducing new aspects, or looking at it from a new perspective, like from your customer's perspective, or from bringing it into a new space, just seeing what you can do to kind of infuse a little bit of that curiosity and openness into your process as well. And then self and collective awareness, that goes again with empathy, and also just understanding who you are, your identity, your values. And the reason why this is incredibly important is because if you understand how you can tap into yourself and what your values, your identity, your beliefs, and be able to understand how you're feeling and how situations or experiences affect you, and then be able to also then look out into the world and into your community, into the collective, and say, okay, so I understand that this is my lens of this. How can I apply that out to the world and say, I have empathy for XYZ, because even though I haven't experienced that, I've experienced this. When I'm experiencing frustration in this particular problem, let's see if this is something that is a systemic issue too that I can address, or maybe I can address it in a way that it, can impact more people, right? So if you're aware of how people are feeling, what people are thinking about, even just relatability too, that's how things go viral, right? If being able to be relatable and connect with others, if you have that self-awareness and that collective awareness, you're going to be able to create and innovate more effectively, because you're going to be kind of tapped into the network, right? So here, I'm going to go here. I'm going to check my comments for a second. All right. Okay. So let me know if you can read this. I know it's a little bit small, but I'm going to read them out loud. This isn't that super important to like be looking at. This is just more for a couple of references that I'll put a little bit bigger in materials. But this is really just a reminder that we are all, this is kind of a dorky way of saying it, but we are all kind of nodes in the system. There is a network of everything. Our tech, there's a network between us, there's a connection between us and the environment. All of these pieces we are part of that connection. This is not, we are not lone actors in the world. The actions that we take, the conscious or unconscious, the things that we create, the impact that comes from that, the ripple effect is always happening. We always have that channel that's tuned into our community, our network. And so being aware of how you sit in that space and you're one of these, these little nodes. So whether you're thinking that's coming from computer programming, where you're in the space where you're passing information between one another, you're thinking of, they have it in nature, there's like plant nodes. And then there's also just, if you're just thinking about in general, if you're thinking about any sort of a network where things are connected, you're a connection point, right? Between different things, or you're thinking of this, what is it, the 6 degrees of separation or whatever. If you're like the node in that sort of a network, if you want to visualize it that way, there's the connection to you, and then you have connections to others, right? So you're always contributing into, and you have these channels into the systems of the world. So when you're looking into that and you're being aware of that, you have connections in your community, and if you're being mindfully informed, you are able to tap into a lot of insight and a lot of inspiration and a lot of opportunities to create and to innovate and to, bring value into the world beyond just yourself and magnify that impact. And again, we all have these channels in there. Some people may have turned up the volume on theirs, right? Some people may be putting a lot more through those channels, but they're there. So it's something to consider when you're kind of tapping into being a creative, is you're never really alone. You are always connected to the systems at large. You are always connected to your community. You are always connected to these creative spaces. You're always connected. I mean, literally, we're always connected online, but that's a great metaphor for this online space where we are contributing, and there are things that can be changed and updated, and we're doing this in this sort of collective way, right? And you're looking at even just how the internet is becoming more decentralized with decentralized finance and these spaces and smart contracts, where a lot of this is going to, I call it almost back into that node space where there's not necessarily so much control in one area. And you're seeing the same parallel happening with creators. So this is an interesting time to really think about, like, what is my role in society, in my space, in my community? What's my role? And also what am I receiving from that too? So this is really just to have the awareness of feeling tapped in. Do it in a mindful way. Don't overload yourself. It's like, it doesn't mean you have to go and sit and listen to the news all day. It's not that. It's really just interacting with the people who are part of definitely in your immediate community, and then tapping out into the world and seeing, where you can find things that are aligned with your values and your desires and passions and what makes you want to create and help, and then see where out in the world you're receiving those messages. Because sometimes we feel that we'll get inspiration or something we want to do, and that there's not necessarily a space for that. But with the proper, again, asking the right questions and openness and having that awareness of what's out there, you can see a potential opportunity to blend those together and to create value. And again, it's just having human experiences. If you're doing the self-development work and you're listening with empathy and you're able to change those lenses again to relate to others and to understand how we use tech and systems, which I'll get into a little bit tomorrow, just as far as I'll just be posting it in the actual to Impact community about how we relate to our platforms and our tech, and why they actually really are a relationship and a value exchange, as opposed to, either these things that are going to take over our lives, or it's going to be, they're not something to necessarily care as much about, except for a means to the end. These are part of our network, right? So it's they're interesting to consider, and they actually can really help a lot in your process. So kind of getting to next. Okay, so the initial phases of the creative process. So this is when we are creating and you're getting into creative thinking and ideation. There's the aspects of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. So these are what, when you're getting into brainstorming, creating a lot of ideas, and starting to think about what can be in the world, you're using a lot of divergent thinking. So that is, what are all the possibilities? Getting a lot of quantity and types and, the ends of the spectrum, right? So when let's say you have to brainstorm to solve a problem, or you are wanting to create, I don't know, if you're a musician, you want to create a new type of experience and a new type of, shift your genre a little bit in your new album, whatever that may be. You might want to, when you're considering like the divergent thinking, you want to open yourself to as many possibilities as possible. And what's interesting about divergent is, many of you might be watching this. I am neurodivergent, and you may say, okay, well, is the divergent part, are they actually related? And I did look this up. Yes, they are. It's divergent. Usually neurodivergent is saying it's not neurotypical. So it's really more referring to ways of thinking and ways the processing in the brain that are like atypical from the norm, right? But there is a lot of backing that neurodivergent thinkers and neurodivergent people also have unique abilities in divergent thinking. So being able to think really quite outside of the box, outside of the systems, probably also that's part nature in it being, or well, depending on whatever that means. So nature being, if it's something that whether you inherited or from trauma, whatever that may be, the reason why you are neurodivergent. If you are so basically, I'm sorry, backing up. Okay, so if there's a nature and the nurture aspect of it, so the divergent thinking, the reason why there is more divergent thinking in these communities is because there's not only just the process of the brain, but there's also just in society having to get creative and work around the systems at large that maybe didn't fit you in school or in other social situations. So that's just an aside. But when you're going into this divergent thinking process, there are parts of the initial phases of the creative process that you can tap into as you are coming up with a new solution. So this can also be applied to, we're going to do a little project for to Impact, and I'll explain that later, but it's really more so to, again, walk you through this process and to allow you to self-reflect. So you can even use this when you're coming up with your idea. So at first you want to have preparation, inspiration. So that's going to be a lot of your initial research. So let's say you're presented with a problem, or you're presented with, wanting to come up with a project. You want to first do some research. So that's going to be pulling in, just getting some inspiration, looking up, so little ideas that are kind of popping into your head. It's not kind of a more formal brainstorming session, and I'll explain why. You can do one there, but you're really kind of playing around with ideas, and you're seeing what kind of just comes in and exploring a few areas. Or you're saying, okay, well, all right, I think I'm going to do this sort of a project because there's something that I want to extend in my business, or you know what, I think I want to try something totally new and I want to release a song. Whatever that may be that we would like to do, or make an NFT, whatever that might be. Let's say you're applying it to the 2Impact process, and if you don't want to necessarily do any of those, you can do something as small as write a series of, thoughtful posts, something like that are in a series, right? Whatever you want to apply this to, that's fine. But you want to do kind of that initial, there's always going to be some initial research, you're gathering some information. You want that flood of awareness, getting into related concepts. So if you're thinking, okay, maybe I want to release an NFT, you might do some initial research about them. You might be looking at related concepts. So you might want to be looking into, spaces where they're like online art, or you might want to look into even just like auctioning, like on eBay, if that's something you used to do, or into e-commerce. There's spaces that you can draw inspiration from on how you want to create that or how you want to deliver it. You can look at NFTs, for example, or you can look at digital art that's already out there. If you want to write a song, you might be getting unrelated inspiration from music. And the thing is that there's a lot of mixed thinking about getting inspiration, and if that is good or bad to your process. Is that going to influence you too much? I think that you're never not going to be consuming over time. The reason why you have the knowledge and the experience that you do is because you interact with the world. So I would say maybe if you're concerned about, you don't want to necessarily take parts of someone else's idea, which you likely won't do that as much as you think, but we all are kind of drawing inspiration from different spaces, then just avoid what's directly in your space, right? So you might want to look at, if you're looking at wanting to create a new course or something, maybe you want to look at course creators in other spaces, or you might want to look at other teaching modalities and just get out of the online space completely. However you want, or look at digital products and that are not courses to get some inspiration. It's just, this is more so just for your information, but it's not taboo to just get inspiration from different places. And then I'll explain where that kind of silence comes in, where you're kind of putting your own spin on it. So as you're doing that, make sure that you're thinking about related concept. There's that kind of inspired energy. Be in that fun, open, curious mode, and then see if there's anyone else who's doing the same. So what's fun kind of about this aspect of a challenge is that when you're doing it at the same time of other people, where they're kind of playing around with different ideas and considering and going down a couple of rabbit holes here and there of what could be, then you get to feed off of that kind of collective energy as well. So then once you kind of gather all of that, then you want to incubate the idea. So I talked about this on a live, and I also have it on the everydayinnovation.io, the blog, and also in the community. But I talked about sleep as one of the ways that you can incubate. So I'm just throwing that out there before I get into this. But there are many ways that you can incubate ideas, and I think it's highly underrated. And it's also, I think people assume that it's a much longer process than it is, or they believe that it'll always be a longer process than it is. You can kind of start to train yourself to make this incubation period a little shorter. But it has to do with rest, being able to work on parallel activities, creative hobbies, setting intentions, with the ideas that you've collected, and telling the subconscious to okay, let's start to incubate these and work on them, right? So as you're preparing and getting inspired, you're pulling again all these resources and you're magnetizing them in. Your brain is working on it and trying to piece, playfully some ideas together. And then the incubation space is where you let that, that subconscious work on pulling in those connections together. And it's something that seems hard to let go of, because if you're trying to solve a problem, you're like, wait, I'm supposed to just pull all this in and then just, step back. Yeah, you are. So what's fun is if you have these hobbies that are already built into your life, or you have these activities that are built into your life that allow you to rest, that allow you to create in other ways, that allow you to expend energy or move your body, that allow you to set intentions or journal and you've done it enough where you can almost speak to your subconscious in a way because you're doing something that is habitual. If you are somebody who likes to think a little bit before they go to sleep, that's another great space to reflect and then kind of let go. This is where the assistance is going to come in from your subconscious. So if you set intentions as you're moving into this space, your subconscious is a very willing servant to you if you're telling it the right thing. The thing is sometimes it's not as helpful if it has a lot of limiting beliefs. But if you are thinking about your intentions and saying, look, I'm working on this problem, I'm working on all these different creative solutions, can you help me piece some of this together to pull together some solid ideas that I can pull together. They can be all over the place, but pull in some solid ideas that I can then consider. So when you're in that incubation period, you can, again, you're moving your awareness into other spaces, and it doesn't mean you can't do anything else. That's also why sometimes I like working on multiple projects at once, because I'll be incubating one thing and working on another, and that's kind of a hack to some of it. It doesn't mean you have to be overly productive. I just sometimes have the energy for that, but other times I'll just rest. And then so you can, as you're incubating in this, there's a lot of, again, if you return to the sleep, there's a sleep video that has to do with like setting those intentions and incubating it while you sleep and rest. That's very helpful as well. And then you're going to get that illumination and those insights that come down. So, when you get those aha, like those downloads and, things are popping up kind of into your conscious awareness, you get the little light bulb that it pops up above your head. You make those connections between things, which really a lot of creativity is making connections between ideas. That's when you want to start like documenting those and saying, here's my pool of ideas. So there's almost a secondary brainstorm that happens. Many people will brainstorm in the beginning, which is good, and that's fine. There's this secondary brainstorm that can kind of come and allow to pull those down a little bit more quickly, or if you need to do it in a collective group, having that preparation, inspiration, incubation, and then doing the brainstorm with others in this illumination insight-ish stage, right? Where maybe those, if you've taken a break, those can potentially be facilitated to pop up during that, because you're in that collective energy. That's a space to do that as well. And then again, this is where you want to note it for your evaluation. So this is the illumination insight part. You have to have some patience with it, but a lot of it has to do with a belief that your mind is very capable of putting together solid ideas for you. So if you have that trust that you've collected all the information you need, you are able to step back from it for a moment or work on other things that can maybe help inspire it, but let your overly logical brain take a break for a moment. This will come, and it will come more quickly the more belief that you have that when I return to I'm going to have some insights here. So it's really fun. And then after you get your kind of pool of information or your pool of ideas, right, you want to start looking at more convergent thinking. So that's going to be taking all the things. So if you're kind of opening, let's say you're kind of opening all up to all possibilities, you're taking all the possibilities that you've now, filtered through your own process, right? And things that are probably a little bit more aligned with you because you're coming up with them, right? And they're being magnetized to you. You can take that and then further refine and filter those down into some considerations, right? So you're looking more for, this is starting to discover the fit of the idea to the impact, the fit of the idea to your values and your systems, the fit of you to a particular new community, whatever that might be. You're starting to discover this fit and then designing for that. And that's going to come actually in the next session. So when you start to evaluate your ideas, you want to return to your research for validation. It doesn't mean validation that it's a good idea or anything like that. It's not necessarily validation in that sense. It's more validation that has this been done yet? Is this something that I can maybe pass by a mentor or a trusted friend? And be careful with trusted friend. You just want to make sure that this is somebody who has the same openness that you do to kind of validate some of the ideas, especially if they are in a specific space. Just be careful just sharing in these early stages, because sometimes you can get unintended criticism, or you can get unintended feedback that is not going to be helpful to your process if that person is not, maybe they're not kind of open to that change yet, or they can't quite see it yet. You don't want that to fully influence your process. But if there is a trusted mentor or friend that you are comfortable ideating with, then this is somebody that you can maybe bring in and just share a little bit about the idea. You can also look to your community or your customers, however you would define community, in the sense that however you're applying it, and see if you could start putting little feelers out there about the idea. And they can come in really at any part of the process. So that could be in your initial research as well. You can look at what customers have been saying, or if your community has been saying. That can come in that space, or it can come into this space after you've already pulled down a bunch of ideas. You can say, oh, is there any alignment with things that I've already heard, or things that I'm seeing my community talking about on Instagram, whatever that might be. And then assess against your context and influence. So again, context and influence are what shape the creation, experience, impact process, and how you're going to fit your own unique way of approaching those into the world, into your project. So your context and influence, again, are going to be, where is this being applied? What are your values, your identity, your what's the environment of where you're putting this, and how does it impact you, and how does it impact like that community? So when you're assessing against it, it's really just like, is what's going to be most aligned with my values? So a lot of ideas might be, but then there may be some that are more aligned with your life, your circumstances, your community's needs at any given point. So that can help you start to almost categorize them in certain ways, or even prioritize them in certain ways, to see with an open mind, what might be a good fit for now. Because there are a lot of really great ideas too, and some can be put on the back burner, put into a space to be backlogged until you feel like it might be a better time, or that it's more aligned with your current season and your current goals. And then you can also look ahead, of course, to the experience and the impact piece. So once you've gathered a lot of different ideas, now you can start looking into, okay, so how is this going to be communicated or implemented out into the world? How do I have any ideas on that? And then also the impact too is, this is the kind of impact I want to have, or this is how I want this to ripple out, or I would like to get this sort of type of feedback so that I can pull it back into my process. So it's looking ahead to them without necessarily designing anything yet, and that's what we'll do next. But it's being aware of, okay, so some of these ideas, the implementation aspect of it would be incredibly difficult, or could be expensive. Or with another one, it would be really hard to get feedback on this particular one. So I'd like to try, I may downplay that one a little bit, because I really want to start getting more feedback and analysis to like bring into my process, right? So that's how you can just keep that in mind going forward. And then I'm just going to peek at the comments. Okay. And then, so the To Impact project, again, this is really not meant to be, so this is a launch, sort of a sprint, but the goal is not to just have a ton of sales, or the goal is not to take you through a defined set of steps that are going to be, part of something that I'm going to upsell or whatever that might be. It's not necessarily meant to be a certain, like, full of tactics and for a specific goal. Could it impact you in that way? Of course it can, because understanding your process and understanding the ownership over that and how you approach things is a complete perspective shift. So, and doing the reflection on your own process will allow you to better go through that in the future. So if you are launching a project or whatever, you may launch this one and it does incredibly well, or you may launch future ones and you've taken this awareness of the process and you're doing a better job of magnetizing the right resources that you need, or getting insight in new ways, or becoming more effective in your creative process or more authentic in your creative process. So that's just a note. But as you're considering this, you can go through this process too of getting that inspiration, playful ideation, doing a little bit of research, looking into, okay, what do I want to focus on right now? What do I feel called to? Is there something that I want to try without it's something in a different space that maybe is something that I would like to explore, because it'll give me the opportunity to test something out that I can't maybe do in my business yet, but it'll give me another playground to release something or do something new, right? And then we'll get into more of the design and the composition aspect soon, like starting on Friday. So I know that seems like, okay, so there's an entire week that's just on the creation and the consideration aspect. Yeah, it is, because you are a creator, and having a good strategy and the perspective and the mindset around it that will facilitate a start that is strong and that is aligned is going to be incredibly important. It's not the only thing, but it is incredibly important as you then go into your execution, how you communicate and how you understand the impact of it. So in the next session, so tomorrow there'll be like a post in the community that will share some information on some systems or tech or tools or how you can connect with that. And that's important in the sense of, before we get into Friday, which is going to be more about figuring out and refining your, like, a project, or having it's a minimum viable experience, a minimum viable idea, a minimum viable, like, what is the thing that you can really boil down to having the best outcome or impact from this. So we'll be applying it to this project, but I'll also make it a little bit more general for all of your considerations. But that'll be more of, it's almost like workshop style. So I can walk you through a particular process to narrow that down and to really focus that plan in. But before then, again, you just want to be gathering a lot of this information, playing with it, incubate on it, and once, if those aha moments are coming up for you, that's great. If they don't necessarily come up for you until Friday or this weekend, that's great as well, because this can all be applied at any point. This is really more about your process and reflecting on it. So it's just going into the mindfulness of bringing all that information in, and then taking that time and a little bit of space to look at other things, or throw yourself into something else for just a moment, just to give your brain a break, and setting those intentions those insights will come to you. And then I'll give you the tools on Friday to kind of work through that and decide on what to go forward with strategically. So I'm excited about this, and I'm excited to see what you all are thinking about. Please share them in the community. The link is in the Twitch chat, and then also on Instagram in the comments, but it'll also be in my bio on Instagram. I'm so excited that we're in this together, and I'm getting on I'm experimenting too, and I'm experimenting with a lot of this these streaming aspects. I know it'll get better every time, and I appreciate your patience on that, but I want to be able to, this is part of my own experience too, is making sure that I can put things out and test them and get the feedback and be able to learn from it and get better. And I'm hoping that every single time this comes on, that's going to be better and better and better. So thank you so much for joining me today, and make sure you're going to see later today that this will be posted into the community. And yeah, that I'm very excited to share with you. So start going and playing and gathering ideas and message. I don't want to share all of it in the videos because I know a lot of you are coming from different spaces, but just send me a message. I'm always happy to brainstorm with you. Have a wonderful day.